to Beans and Breakdowns, a podcast dedicated to bridging the gap between specialty coffee and the heavy music community. On this episode, I'm joined by Patrick Sheridan, guitarist for the band Fit For An Autopsy. So grab a fresh cup of coffee and wake the fuck up! What's up, caffeinated crew? Today I'm joined by somebody that I'm very excited. This was very last minute and kind of unexpected. We kind of fit this in right before I head off for vacation. So I'm very happy about that. But I'm joined by Patrick from Fit For An Autopsy. How are you doing?
Hello. I'm great. How are you? Thank you for having me.
I'm doing wonderful. It's been quite a day, an early start day. I'm happy to be having some coffee right now though. And I'm sure that you are too.
I am. I'm very excited to be drinking a cup of coffee, talking about, two things that are near and dear to me, heavy music, extreme music, and coffee. You know what I mean? Those are my go-tos, and the only other thing that could make it better is if we happen to trip over my tattoo career. Those are the three things I love the most. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, that's very exciting. Maybe we can touch on some tattoo stuff. That'll be like something that we haven't explored before. So maybe we'll get into that as well. But what are you drinking to start out?
Well, one of my favorite companies that roasters, or however you want to put it, is actually from New Jersey, where I'm from. They're located in Jersey City. They have multiple stores, like storefronts, and their roaster is also there. It's called Mod Cup, Modern Cup. And they are, in my opinion, when it comes to modern coffee, like leaps and bounds ahead. So today, I actually have it here. Diego Bermudez Thermal Shock. It's a wash. I keep it in these guys, but it's unbelievable. It's like a fruity cherry kind of thing, and really smooth. It has like a little kind of cocoa background to it, just like a touch of it, at least, or caramelly kind of thing, but mostly fruity. And it's one of my favorites. So that's what I got today. And like I had mentioned before, Chemex 16-to-1 ratio, and just like, easy going. So that's this afternoon's cup of coffee.
Do you just do like single cup at a time, or do you like to do a double?
It depends. If I'm craving a lot of something, I'll do, a little bit of a 2-cup, 3-cup kind of thing. If I have guests over, it will change the idea. So it just really depends. You know what I mean? Most times single cup, because I think you get a better pour and a better kind of flavor profile going with like 20 grams, 25 grams, and kind of playing with your I guess your science behind how you do it, whether it's a 15 or 20 gram pour per gram of coffee, or however you're trying to do it. So your ratios or whatever, but it's just a little more controllable.
I have something. So I really wanted to go get something a bit more funky, but my schedule didn't allow it. So I did reach for some Mello, which is from Toronto. It's probably like top 3 favorite Toronto roasters at the moment.
Okay.
Pretty well established. This is their Costa Rica Rosa Aura. It is a natural processed single origin from Costa Rica. It has chocolatey orange, violet, and some like strawberry, jammy strawberry flavor.
Okay. Yeah.
It's in French. It's like confiture de fraise, which would be like, or de fraise, which would be confit strawberry. I don't know exactly what that flavor is, but there it is.
Sounds good. Interesting.
So yeah, it's pretty good. I'm doing it iced, like you had observed earlier.
Yep.
It's been very hot in Montreal.
Yeah.
So I wanted to switch it up afternoon, feeling a little bit low, feeling a little slow. So I decided to ice it.
Yeah, when you do your ice stuff, are you stepping up your grounds and doing a little heavier, get a little
Mhm.
stronger base kind of thing? Yeah.
So I go
I
probably
know.
a notch finer,
Yep.
just to
More
also help with
suspension,
that.
water.
Yeah, because you're decreasing your water by about 40%.
Yep.
And then I usually do about 1 more gram. So extending it just a bit. I've gone to
Yep.
2 and it just sometimes will blow out a bit too much. So,
Yeah. Then you either get like lack of extraction, a little bit more bitter flavor, or you get it's so strong that it almost feels uncontrollable. And it's crazy how those little changes in ratio can like make a difference because I have a handful of coffees that 15 to 1 is like the go. Like
mhm.
that's the move. Like Mod Cup was doing this Lulabear. It's anaerobic, like fermenty, like really, really good. And 15 to 1 all day. And then Will and I, when I went up to see him, he found this company, which I want to make sure to mention, called Presta. And they do this crazy, like it's the strongest blueberry flavor I've ever tasted in a cup of coffee in my whole entire life. And I made it at his house and I did a 15 to 1 and it wasn't there. And he's like, no, do a 16 and make it a little lighter and it'll hit the notes. And man, when I tell you that it changed the flavor, so it really does change the flavor. And it's so nerdy and like such a weird thing, but like experimenting with this stuff is like probably one of my favorite things. What kind of ratios do you use? Like, I've been reading into doing pour over classes. I
Mhm.
want to do SCA offers. SCA is a specialty coffee association for people that don't know that. They offer a pour over course where you can actually learn, and then you can go into coffee shops and as an SCA certified pour over technician and give I guess pour over lessons or whatever you want to refer to it as, and people will come in and you work with the community. So I've been reading a bunch of stuff that they talk about, and like they talk about like different temperatures in between pours, and like how to after your bloom pouring like your bloom is at like 201 and then your next pour is at 203 and then your next pour is at 207 and you're like increasing the pour to the idea is the extraction happens quickly with the first pour. So then you're opening the bloom even more to get more out of it and get more flavor. So, like, you know, with that kind of stuff in mind, it's endless. You know what I mean? So I think I'm going to be taking a course and like getting into like the finer details of that. But I mean, this can go on forever. You know what I mean? Everybody's got an opinion, and you're either open to opinion or you're not.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
I've definitely gone down the sciencey rabbit holes, and especially during the pandemic, where I know all of us were like getting on
oh yeah.
those making sourdough bread and
Uh-huh.
getting into coffee or cocktails or whatever your jam was. But I definitely went down the sciencey side, and I'm like trying all this different stuff. And then as soon as I start working full time again, I'm like, I just need a recipe I can do every single day with any given coffee, and it will hopefully give me the best cup. But not to say that I don't go on the experimentation routes every now and then. Like I've got to trickle it. I don't know if you've ever messed around with one of those.
I'm not sure what that is.
So it's like a zero bypass brewer that has
Okay.
it's got like a drip kind of screen on top, and then your grounds sit in a chamber almost looking like a really wide AeroPress, and it has
Okay,
a drip
cool.
screen underneath, and you put a paper
Okay.
filter.
Yep.
So what it does is it forces all of the water down through this single cone with no or at as minimal as possible channeling.
Okay.
So it gives you a true like full extraction, and you can do up to like 10-minute brews,
Whoa.
which is crazy, and it
Yeah.
tastes wild. But
I'll have to check it out. I
it's
just
definitely
took a little note.
you what? Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
a note taker, so I just wrote down the name of it. I'll be digging into that after we get off.
But it's an Australian dripper. It was a little overpriced when it first came out, but I think the price has come down quite a bit. So
Yeah,
it's
I'm
fun to
definitely guilty of spending too much money on coffee thing. Definitely.
I saw a photo on your Instagram from a while back of it was like a Hario Switch with a I think you had a bag of DAC next to it.
Hmm.
Was that
Yeah.
your setup?
That was on tour maybe, but yeah, I have, oh man. So I'll just run the gamut. I have that. I have a V60. I have an AeroPress. I have a Chemex. I have a Mocha Master for big batch brews. I have a Yama cold brew tower, which I'll turn this so you can see I'm currently
Oh
brewing some
yes.
cold. I have an Aseo espresso machine. I have a hand grinder for the espresso machine that Z1 Espresso makes, which is the best hand grinder that you can buy. I have fellow Stag um, water kettle. I have an Encore grinder, two different scales. This is just what I'm looking at. I have a French press. I have so much because it's like the rabbit hole, right? Like you get on the internet and you start reading, and they all do something different. If I want
Yeah.
a quick cup, my V60 is the move, right? But if I want a little bit of a slower pour, stronger extraction, I go with the Chemex. It's a little bit different, right? The filter is different, the pour is different. If I want something that's a soaked coffee, obviously I'm going to use a French press. I have literally 15 different methods that I can go to at any given time, but my Chemex is my favorite. I've gone over them all, I've done them all. You get a little bit more extraction, a little bit stronger flavor. I like my coffee to have a little bit more punch
Hmm.
without feeling over processed or burnt. So that's my move. Um, but yeah, it's bad. And COVID was the worst because I had so much time to like read and learn and all this stuff. So it's become one of those things where I used to um I used to use multiple companies and all these things, but now I've narrowed it down to like my favorites. And then I have some little hits that I kind of go to occasionally. But I mean, it's it's an expensive hobby if you let it. Like I have this, which I was really wanted to talk about. And I think we're going to talk about Mod Cup a lot
Hmm.
because it's a company that I like, if that's okay with you. But this is the EXO that they just released. It's a geisha. It was $100 for 4 ounces. And and let me tell you something. It is out of control, man. It is the craziest coffee I've ever had. So when we're talking about spending money on something like this is what I want to spend my money on. I found what I like to brew with, but it's a cognac strawberry. It's got like some flowery, violety kind of overtones to it. I don't know if people out there know like how it works or what it is, but this stuff comes from a particular forest in Ethiopia. It's like handpicked, very minimal numbers. Like geisha stuff's getting super expensive. Like a Panamanian geisha sold for $2,500 a pound recently. So this stuff is like out of control coffee. And it's in my notes. I made sure to note that the XO process is a different kind of fermentation um, that's done specifically with this particular geisha. So you can get so deep into the rabbit hole with that kind of stuff that like it can actually cost you, like you could like write it off on your taxes kind of shit. You know what I mean? Like it's crazy. But then I have like an $18 Ethiopia that I got from Golden Lantern. That's just like a really straightforward Ethiopia that is also incredible. So there's room for every budget. There's room for everything. I'm just a glutton and I love new things. You know what I mean? So it's real easy to get caught up in that, but
For sure.
it's tough, dude. And I know Evan told you that I'm like obsessed with coffee, but it's true. Like it's really bad. It's bad.
I mean, there's worse things to be obsessed with. I'll say.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
um, if it's gonna be anything, and like I truly do feel I've said it so many times that I'm sure some listeners are probably sick of it, but like coffee is worth the attention, I feel, and coffee is worth the like care. Um, like I was even I have like an I guess an anecdote from today where I'm buying this coffee and I'm standing in line and a patron behind me asks the barista, "Oh, is this coffee organic?" Organic, and I was like, "Oh, like in theory," and it wasn't even my place to say because I said it because the barista was like, "I'm not sure, I don't really know." So I was like, "Well, in theory, most specialty coffee is going to be quote unquote organic." I was
Sure.
like, they don't have an organic branding or stamp on it because it's thousands of dollars. It costs a ton of money. They have to go through all of this additional process and
Yes.
be 3 years of transition to become an organic farm just so
Yes.
that they can get the stamp and charge a little bit more for the
Right.
coffee. But most practices at a family farm where you're going to buy this, you know, this coffee from is going to be doing
Is that
close
Heart
to
Roaster?
organic. Huh?
Is that a Heart Roasters bag that you just held up?
No,
What
no,
bag?
no, no. This is the
Oh,
Mello
it's
one.
just okay.
Uh,
Sorry. Go
but
ahead.
most farms are going to be doing something close to organic. And if I'm completely out of line, somebody please reach out and tell me that. But as far as my experience and being in coffee is concerned, most direct like farmers I've heard from are doing like healthy practice and they're
Yeah.
producing.
Well, I mean, also people don't think about that. That question is kind of like a weird one for me because organic is in general is kind of a farce, right? Like it's
Yeah.
something that they will use as, I mean, you could go as far as to talk about how like McDonald's created a company called organic, whatever, in the name of the company so they could sell you salads that say organic on it, but you're not getting an organically processed salad or grown, nothing is grown organically, I guess I should say. It's just the name of the company. Like there was like a whole big scandal about that. So like, when you're talking about those sorts of things, like you have to take into account what organic means, how far you have to go, like you said, to create that. And also, these processes, growing coffee is actually kind of bad for the environment, which is another thing that people don't talk about, right? Like growing coffee strips the soil and does all these things. So these farmers really have to create healthy practices in order to keep the land fertilized and properly nutrient filled in order to grow this coffee the way that they do and not strip the land completely. So like you can't use crazy chemicals, you can't do all these things. And I think a lot of people aren't educated in that way, but what an interesting question to ask to start like an educational conversation with somebody in a line of people. And then you run into two things. You either sound like a snobby coffee nerd, or you sound like somebody who's trying to teach somebody something, and it's up to the listener whether or not they get it. You know what I mean? So like
Yeah.
you would hope that that person would say, oh, okay, and then look into it. If they buy a bag, look into the company and do that whole thing. But most people don't care enough. And the fact that you know that says something about your tie to how seriously you take coffee. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And like at first, like I honestly I was trying to phrase my response in a way because I wasn't invited to that conversation. I was butting in, obviously, but I was trying to say like from my understanding, like trying to kind of play dumb, but kind of also be like, I do know that most like most specialty coffee is built on sustainability from its outlook. It
Yeah.
was just it was a precarious situation to be in, and I didn't want to come off as a dick, but
Yeah.
it ended up with her being like, well, I read on the internet this, and I was like, okay. So I ended up just kind of being like, well, tell
Okay.
me what you like, let me know what you find out. And then I just kind of left because it was like,
So, in reference to that, there's a company called, I believe, Maiden Coffee, my buddy Paul, shout out to Paul because he was early on helping me figure out what I liked in my coffee journey. Paul Callie, he owns a spot in Asbury Park called Cafe Volan, and he's a hardcore kid. He's been I met him when he was 15 years old in the hardcore scene, like 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And we just come from the same area. And he owned Maiden, and I believe he no longer owns it, but I know that recently they released something kind of touching on exactly what you're talking about. And there's a video about it on the internet. So you can reference that if somebody like kind of, stands against that thing. Do you make organic coffee? And like people don't realize the amount of money that would and time that would have to go into that. Like these are small businesses that are not making like Maxwell House coffee money. Like these are people that own a small business that are maybe making money, but not to that level. And this is like you're talking thousands and thousands of dollars and lots of time in order to be able to do that. And who has time for that? Just
Mhm.
these people are trying to make a living. So, but yeah, I think it's interesting what's important to people. You know what I
Right.
mean? So yeah.
Yeah. That, and at the end of the conversation, as I'm walking away, I'm like thinking like, I wonder why that's the most important thing, and not like the fact that this family is trying to just make a coffee that they care about and sell it to a market that is really far away from them to
Sure.
hopefully make a great cup of coffee.
Um, but case in point, when I was in Mexico City, I went on like a wild goose chase by myself in places that I probably should have been. And I was just like, fuck it. Like I found out there was a couple people there that kind of pointed me in some directions. And then I did like a big deep dive when I was on the plane on like where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do, and like took some notes and, caught an Uber in the middle of Mexico City by myself at like 8 o'clock in the morning, and like went to a couple of different specialty shops. And I found one. I walked in and I didn't like the vibe. It was like a college coffee shop, like blenders running with fraps and all this stuff. And I was like, okay, this isn't for me. I'm out. And then the second one that I went to, that was the one. I walked in, it was like espresso, latte, cortado, macchiato, a couple of different drinks. You get a cappuccino, and then there were two different pour overs, one batch brew, and a cold brew. And that was it. And I was like, all right, I'm home.
Oh yeah.
So I sit down, I order up two different pour overs and a cortado and a latte, all in one shot. And he's like, oh, are you meeting someone? And I was like, no. Bring them to me however you get them done, no rush. So first thing he brings me is the cortado. It was a hit. Second thing he brings me was the latte, and I'm sipping on the latte and he drops off the pour over. So again, I do something that some coffee drinkers think is a cardinal sin, and I put creamer in my coffee sometimes because I love the texture of it. I love the taste. And also it reminds me of being a kid and drinking coffee on Sundays with my mom. So like, I'm like, okay, let me drink this black just so I can get the experience. So I love black coffee, so I drink it black. And there was enough in there for two decent pours. And then I did it with a little bit of sweetener, and I put a little milk in it, and I drank that. And that was really good too. And then I get the cold brew, and I'm high as a kite on caffeine at this point. And then I start talking to them, and they tell me, you should buy this. And it was this coffee from this farm in Oaxaca that it's a woman, single person that owns the farm. She makes this super small batch, and it's like impossible to get in the States. They only have it in a handful of spots, like in Mexico, that you can get it. And she does minimal batch, but I mean, she grows it, she washes it in the river next to her house. Like it's legit, dude. So I bought 3 pounds of that and brought it home, gave one to Will and one to my buddy Mike that are like coffee people. So that's the kind of experiences I like. That's the stuff I like. So what's important to me is very different than what's important to that person that asked you about the organic thing. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
the experience for me is there. Like, I have a little Instagram page that's called Tour Life Coffee that while I'm on tour, I make posts on, and it's just about my favorite places. Like I go to Sweet Bloom when I'm in Denver. I go to Heart Roasters when I'm in Portland. When I'm in Philly, I go to Ox. When I'm in New Jersey, I go to Mod Cup.
Hmm.
Like there's just these places that are burnt into me now. Like there's a place in Hamburg that I go to that I always try to make it to. There's a place in the UK now that I was turned on to that I'll go back to while I'm there. Like there's all these spots that are slowly becoming habitual because I want the best. And my wife will attest to this. I'll hear about a really great coffee spot and I'll go in and I'll buy a cup of coffee and I'll take a sip. And if I don't like it, I'll throw it in the garbage on the way out the door. And I won't drink. Like I'm very particular. So whatever is important to whoever is great. If it keeps you drinking coffee, if it keeps you talking about it, sure. If
Yeah.
organic is important, find your organic coffee and love it. But you can buy organic labeled coffee in Costco and it tastes like shit. So, you know, there's some things like I've spent $100 on 4 ounces of coffee. Like it's so bad. It's so bad. And people don't understand it, right? Like people will be like, "Oh, that's so nerdy. You're pretentious." But then they want to talk to me about the hops in their beer or, their strain of sativa that they get when they're it's all the same shit. Like we're doing the same thing.
Right.
So and to me, like it's a community. That's why I want to do the SCA pour over course. That's why I want to start doing that. And I have some, there's a real reason that I want to do that because I want to start my own thing. I want to do something in coffee, whether it be open a store and have like a real modern, simplistic coffee shop with, like I said, 10 drinks available. I don't want the person that wants to go to Starbucks. I don't want the person that wants to go to the small coffee shop, down the road or I'm sorry, that wants to go to the big coffee shop down the road and get like a chicken salad sandwich and a frappuccino and like some like flavored coffee. Like I don't, that's not what I do. What I like, I want simple. I want people that love it, and I want to create a community around it. So when they come into the shop, they're like, man, this is great. Like, what should I try today? What should I do today? You know what
Hmm.
I mean? And have baristas that actually love it, can, you know, they love all the aspects of it, whether it be somebody that loves, latte art or, what's a cool blend to put through the espresso machine today? Like maybe take something that's a little outside the box. Like Mod Cup does this thing called Secret Affair. That's their regular espresso, which is incredible. But then they do a thing called Fruity Affair, which is they take a blend of like a pink bourbon or like some kind of fruity espresso and they mix it with the Secret Affair. And then you get this fruity sweet latte that you don't have to put any sugar in
Hmm.
and you just drink it. That's the kind of shit I want. You know what I mean? So, everybody's got their own private addiction. But for
Yeah.
me, that's, you know, but don't get me wrong, dude. I'll also like my mom is the one that turned me on to coffee when I was a kid, right? So when I was a kid, I never knew what I was drinking. I just knew I was having a cup of coffee with my mother on a Sunday morning, right? And, you know, say what you will about my relationship with my parents, but there's a few things that I really hold dear. And one of those things is being like a teenager and drinking coffee with my mother and the way she made the coffee and what she did, I didn't know it was some shitty $8 blue canister this big of pre-ground Maxwell House. I just knew that she had been making coffee for so long and she did really, really well. So I'm down to just have a regular cup of good coffee because sometimes that's great too. We stop at a rest stop on the road and I run in and, I can smell the coffee and sometimes it smells good. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'll just have this little cup of coffee and, and not make it myself on a moving vehicle. And sometimes that's great too. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. There is a line for me on what I will and won't drink, but I don't want to sound like too pretentious because I'm open to suggestion. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
A cheap coffee sometimes is just what the situation calls for. You know what I mean?
I agree. I agree. There's a nostalgia. There's a comfort feeling when you get some. I call it diner coffee. Like
Yeah.
yeah,
And that's what my mom did when I was growing up. She worked in a diner. So that's funny that you mentioned that. I had access to all that stuff. And in New Jersey, diner culture is a whole different thing.
yeah.
So coffee in New Jersey, the diners was like a real thing. And it almost tasted the same at everyone. It was some, food company bullshit coffee, but it was kind of good.
Yeah. I grew up with like a Waffle House. So,
Where are
the
you from?
Savannah.
Yeah, I live in Atlanta. Yep.
Oh, yeah.
So
Perfect.
there's a
Yeah.
Waffle House. They're fighting in the parking lot at the Waffle House down the street right now, dude.
Right now at 3
Yeah.
p.m.
Yep, absolutely.
The
People
best.
don't understand that comment unless they've been to a real like real Waffle House, not one in not a new one in a nice neighborhood, like
No.
one in kind of a sketchy area, like where like part of the application process is you got to like fight two of the line cooks in the parking lot before they hire you. You know what I mean? Like whoever I saw like a video on the internet about Waffle House, and they were like, all right, you got to fight this dude in the parking lot, and whoever loses works the night shift tonight. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's how Waffle Houses are. That's funny.
It's not it's a democratic process, or it's not even a democratic process. It's just a process by elimination. They have the rules and you follow it.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
yeah. Waffle House was the after show stop always. 1 a.m. It's always open. And you're gonna get a what's that thing? The all-star special.
Oh yeah, yep, absolutely. Well, unfortunately, I've given up on eating the Waffle House style food because I'm old and I have to actually take care of myself now. So, but man, I miss Waffle House waffles. Dude. I do a Waffle House waffle and a shitty cup of coffee. Sometimes it's like the perfect end to an evening. It really
It's
is.
so good. Like a
Yep.
nice little dessert.
Yeah, I cooked in 82 pounds of butter.
Hell
Yeah.
yeah. That's the flavors at.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Um, that's great. And the shop that you're outlining in your vision is 100% my favorite coffee shop. I don't have one here really. We honestly, there's one that's becoming like a very fond spot for me. That's like a Korean coffee spot.
Oh, okay.
And next time you're in
The
town,
name.
we'll be able to get over there. But
And you're in
it's
Montreal?
yes.
Okay. I'm making notes. Just so I
He's a
have
note taker.
what's the name of the shop?
The shop is White Heron, like the bird.
Yep.
And it's literally like 2 blocks, 3 blocks from the shop that I manage.
Okay.
But I prefer to go to this other shop just because
Uh-oh.
my shop is like a college. It is
Ah,
like, but
what
we
we were
don't do the
talking
fraps
about.
and the things. It's definitely like a French pastry coffee shop kind of situation. But
Okay.
the White Heron is just so relaxing, peaceful, minimal decor. They have a Slayer
Man.
espresso machine.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's a good one.
that's a good one.
Okay. Yeah. So you're in Montreal. I'm trying to remember the name of the shop, but I can't remember the name of the venue. There's a venue, the last venue we played in Montreal, we were out with the Casey Strain, Esquella Grind, and Primitive Man. It was a second floor venue with the most ridiculous up the stairs load in and big open room, low stage. And there was a coffee shop across the street to the left, like maybe 150 yards from the front door.
That was Cafe and Gamba it was across the
Yes.
street from Theater Fairmount.
That's the one. That
Yep.
coffee shop, pretty good. I had a couple of good experiences in there. Really good latte and a really good pour over from that coffee shop. But yeah, that place was great. Montreal's good for coffee. You
It's
know,
good for
I I,
coffee.
I definitely like Montreal.
Montreal's a coffee town for sure. We've got so many like amazing roasters. I probably have 3 bags from just local roasters that I pick up in my cupboard right now. Um,
Yeah.
and I recently started probably like 6 months ago, started working for my friend's roaster in town. which we're moving our operation over. So I'm learning how to roast currently, which is sick. It's like a
Yeah, that's
kind of
awesome.
it's like a dream that I've had for a while to be able to like roast coffee as a job
Yeah.
and like be a part of that. But we're roasting in a co-op where like 20 different roasters use the equipment, and that's going to be a cool community to be a part of. So
Yeah, I mean, what a better way to learn and get educated than to work with the people that are behind the scenes doing it every day, and having multiple different companies to kind of keep an eye on, and like, not steal practices, but steal practices. You know what I
it's
mean?
no knowledge sharing.
Yeah, you're sharing knowledge, and the one that you want to pay the most attention to is the person that's giving you the least information. That's always the key. It's the same thing like as guitar players or tattooer or whatever. Like you're always watching the person that's got the biggest secrets because they're always the best. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? That's a cool. Congratulations on that. That's awesome.
Thanks. But yeah, whenever you're in town, it's going to be difficult to pick a shop or a few shops, but I'll have to make you a list. I have a map, like a Google map that I try to share with
I have
anybody
one
that's
too.
coming around.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I have one too. That's like there's like 15 people involved in it, and it's the craziest thing I've ever seen. And it
as well.
started off, it's just a Google Maps thing that like a bunch of my friends that are coffee nerds that like, add to, and there's hundreds of shops all over the world. It's crazy. It's a bunch of guys that tour, and like it's one of those things where it's just become outlandish at this point. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, it's it's definitely a fun thing to do to map out and like, gives you something to do on tour when you have downtime.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been doing one with my bandmates and we just call it tour coffees, and I've shared it with them so that they can add, or I guess I'm the only one adding to it, but they are like looking at the spots. That's why we're wanting to tour. We made sure to get our visas so that we're able to just go get coffee in all the
Yeah.
cities that we want to get coffee in.
I mean, Montreal, like you're not too far from the Detroit border coming
Mm-hmm.
into the States. You're not too far from, obviously the New York border, but Detroit is coming up and there's like a handful of really good shops there. So like you guys are pretty close. I mean, I know there's a border crossing that goes directly into the Detroit area, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
Like right into Michigan.
It's
So like
Windsor, I think.
yeah. Yep. So that's like a pretty interesting area because, downtown Detroit, where it used to be a place where you would not frequent, is turned into a place that like now it's a great time to go there.
Mm-hmm.
And the hardcore scene is blowing up there. They just did some big festival there, and there was something like 3,000 people at the festival. And it was like supposedly one of the best fests that's happened in America in like a pretty long time, or the US, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's definitely cool vibes there and good coffee. So,
Yeah, they put on that Cold as Life. I think it was the Fest also did that Cold as Life reunion show like
yep. I
a,
heard
a
that was
couple
great
months ago.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which
What a
was
scary, fun band.
I love Cold as Life.
Listen, dude, Born to Land Hard is incredible, but that Declination of Independence record, that record is like so aggressive and scary, and like Jeff's vocals are crazy, and
Mm-hmm.
the guitars sound like a chainsaw. Like, what a great record!
Yeah,
That's a
I
that's
love.
that's that's one of those bands that I saw live when I was a kid for the first time, and they've been around a really long time. When I say kid, like probably getting close to my 20s, but it's the first time I ever saw a person with like the whole side of their face with a giant pitbull tattoo on it, and in person. And I was like, holy shit, these guys look crazy. Like just dudes that came out to the show.
Mm-hmm.
I just remember being like, this is frightening. But what a great band.
Um, were you also in Shattered Realm?
Oh man, yeah. Yes, I was. Couple of different versions of that band I was in. That was late 90s, early 2000s, Pat. I played guitar for a little bit and I played bass for a little bit. So I did a couple of stints with that band.
Were you in any of the variations with Joe?
Joe Hardcore?
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Briefly. I like Joe, and I see that he's doing the band again, and I'm stoked to see him doing that. Like it looks like they're having fun and they're doing the thing. And, you know, there's always talk about it on the internet and who believes in what and whatever, but I'm just stoked to see Joe doing that. Joe does a lot for the hardcore scene, and I've known Joe for a really long time, so I love to see it. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? It's definitely, yeah. I'm happy to see Joe out doing his thing. So
Yeah, it's cool that he's. I see a lot of the comments too, and I'm like, I mean, let the man do his thing. Like,
well, everybody has opinions. You know what I mean? Everybody has opinions, and people have opinions on the way that things work. And without falling too far into, the background of the band and the positive and negative parts of the band, is like you can't pretend to understand the dynamics of everything that happens in every band and everything that goes on. You can be fans of the music, you can love the music, you can hate the music, you can support it, you can not support it. But the truth of the matter is like, I don't love a lot of my favorite bands' records. I don't love a lot of the choices my favorite bands make. And I end up not liking the politics around a lot of my favorite bands because I have very specific politics. But if you get involved in that side of everything in your life, you're not going to be able to do fucking anything. So enjoy it or don't enjoy it, but your opinion really doesn't matter that much. My opinion doesn't matter that much. And like, I used to think it did, but now I realize it doesn't. You know what I mean? Like, people can listen to our coffee conversation and be like, fuck that guy, thermal shock anaerobic nerd, like whatever, fine. That's great. But then if 5 people care about what I'm talking about, that's great for me. That's good enough.
yeah.
The same with music, the same thing with politics, the same thing with all this stuff. Like, yes, if you're on the wrong side of politics, in my mind, that far, obviously I'm not going to support you, but like, let the fucking band go out and play shows and have fun and do what they're doing. Like, if there are not people or things or certain things happening with that band, it's for a reason, and you don't need to know it. You know what I mean? Just like it or don't, and that's fine. So the internet's a crazy place, man. It's
It
crazy.
really is. It really is. Like, a lot of people have this sense of invincibility, I feel like, where they're able to say their opinions without any kind of, and I guess this is true, but they can say a lot of opinions without any kind of consequence. Because I remember being in the scene back when, if you said something in your local scene to somebody, then you had to maybe back it up in person when you saw them at a
Deal
show.
with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was. I remember. I mean, I've been around for a long time, and I've seen a lot of different variations of what the hardcore and the punk rock scene are. I mean, this is taking it back and aging myself a little bit, but my second show ever was SOD and Exodus in 1987 at, I believe, the Roxy in New York City. My older brother took me to shows when I was like 10, 11 years old. I started going to shows at 86. My 10th birthday, we went to like a local thrash show, and I met a bunch of people, and my brother started taking me to shows. And by the time I was 15, I met a couple of the guys that worked at CBGB's, and they were letting me slide in the door. So I was sneaking off to New York City with my friends at 15 on Sundays, going to shows at CBGB's. Like, I was a baby. And like back then, if you said something and someone found out and they didn't like it, they just punched your face off your body. And there was just no discussion about it. And you just got beat up. And that's what it was. And I like that it's not like that now. I like that people are able to speak their mind and maybe have less concern about that. But there's also like this fine line, because I like that we live in a time when people's feelings and emotions are being taken seriously. People can be what they want. And there's you have to think about what you say. I wasn't always the nicest person. I didn't always say the best things. I didn't always do the best things. I've said this in a million interviews. You go watch them.
Yeah.
Like, I've worked really hard to better myself and be a better person than I was. I really believe that that's what these times are about. If you are bettering yourself in your situation, you're doing the right thing. If you're taking things seriously, you're doing the right thing. But if you're just falling into fuck all these people and fuck this and fuck that, and then pretending to be something good in on the surface and then talking shit in the background on the internet or doing whatever you're doing, eventually those things come out. And you're right. There's different kinds of consequences for it now, but there's still consequences. So, like, just try to be a better person. Don't be a piece of shit your whole life. There's a lot of people that don't like me because of shit I've done and the things that I've done and said and the places that I've been and the things I've seen. But you know what? Like, I'm not like that anymore. And it's okay that you did something bad and you want to be better, but don't be a piece of shit. It's pretty easy because there are still people out there that will punch your jaw off your face if you do something stupid. If you're picking on some young kid, you're going to have to answer to somebody that might kick your ass. Maybe they'll talk about it on the internet, or maybe you'll get beat up. And like, people don't like that. And I'm not saying condone violence, but I'm just saying there's still people out there that are like that. And I'm sure you see it in your local scene. Every once in a while, somebody gets the dust knocked off of them and you're like, well, we saw that coming. You know what I mean? So, but that's kind of the beauty of the scene we're in. You get to choose where you want to be. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I don't know. That's punk and hardcore has always been about accepting things and changing with the times and being willing to accept change in a way where it's positive for the things about you. And it's also always been about younger people. Like, there's always been this separation between the elitist, like older hardcore person, and then the younger scene of people that are trying to make change that's good for them. And it's always turned into this thing. And at 48 years old, I'm accepting to what younger people are interested in. I want to understand those things because I was that thing when I was 16, fighting the hierarchy of, whatever hardcore was back then. And now we have people that are accepting to different lifestyles, different cultures, that are standing up for each other in ways that they think are positive. And there's this older crowd. I refuse to not talk like this. I refuse to not be this thing, with this toxic behavior that is not what hardcore is about. That's not what punk rock is about. The kids will have their say. That's always been an important part of hardcore culture. So stop standing against that. Let these kids have their way, and yeah, stop saying things. Stop using words that are toxic to people and start educating yourself on this stuff. And if you're doing that, you're bettering yourself and you're bettering your community. If you're not, you're holding back progress. So, I don't know how we went from coffee to talking about hardcore politics, but this is why I stay away from that stuff. I worry about me. I try to be good to people. And yeah, I wasn't always that person because I was fucked up and broken. And I was angry at my life and I was mad at things and I wanted to offend people. And I thought I was some sort of fucking tough guy and I acted like an asshole a lot. And now I'm trying to not be that person, and it's something important to me. So it's in all cultures, but I think hardcore and punk rock are supposed to be productive and I guess forward thinking. And it's disappointing sometimes,
Right.
but whatever. That's a different, maybe a different topic, or I don't know how you feel about what I said, but I really stand firmly with the idea of being educated. I don't know everything. I don't understand everything. And it's okay to have feelings. It's okay to feel a certain way and to be a certain type of person. Like, I don't have a right to tell a human being what to be, just myself,
Well, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you're only responsible for what you do and what you say. So I think
I believe that to a certain degree. I also think we have to check our friends.
Oh, no, for sure.
I think you have to check
that. Yeah, for sure. That could have gotten out of
and
context.
people make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, yes, you're responsible for you, but I also think, and I know you agree with this, and I'm just saying it because I think it's important to be said. We need to check our friends when our friends are doing things that maybe don't suit the situation or the place and time. And what that means is current state of the world. You know what I mean? If your friends are doing things that are bad, it is your responsibility to be like, hey, I don't fuck with that. If we're gonna be friends and that's how you carry yourself, we can't be friends, you know,
Yeah.
and I believe in that.
Reel it in.
Yeah. People will take things out of context if they can. And I know what you meant, but I think it's important that we say that. Like, check your friends. Your
Yeah.
friends are doing things are bad, check your friends, and check on your friends. Maybe your friends need you and your friends need guidance and education, right? Like, how important is that? Being willing to teach people the things that maybe they're ignorant to. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So,
Exactly. Did you happen to see the newer speed video, that real life love video?
I don't know. Maybe is it the flute one?
No, no, it's the one before the flute one.
No, I don't think I have.
It's like basically it's them. I don't know what the lyrics are exactly like, but it's basically aimed at like taking care of your friends, like checking in, and it's
Yeah,
like just it's kind of like fast clips. It's a little cheesy, a little corny, but I think everything Speed does has this little twinge of corniness to it, which I
yeah,
do enjoy.
sure.
But it's them basically like just living out, like they'll get in arguments or they'll like hugging, checking on your people. And for some reason, it just hit me in a way. And I'm watching the video for the first time, like tearing up, being like, yo, it's so nice that like a hardcore band that's like at the top of kind of that tier right now is like really broadcasting things that we've needed for, I think quite a long time, is basically checking in on your friends and like standing beside your friends, even when you don't agree with, everything, or you get into arguments, but at the end of the day, like that's your people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we the world is crazy and everything is difficult. It's harder and harder to live. It's harder and harder to afford to live. It's harder and harder to do the things that you like. And we live in a time right now where like um, there's a lot of extremes happening, and that makes it difficult for people to have um, the space that they may need to navigate the situations that are in their brain. So, what's the most important thing to do? Educate each other, talk to your friends, be there for the people around you. Like, I had like this really crazy experience that kind of shook me up to be a little more outspoken about this sort of thing. But we did this heavy metal cruise. It was the Headbangers Boat. Lamb of God put it on. It was this really cool mix of like, I felt right at home because it was a really great mix of like some hardcore bands and some thrash metal bands and some death metal bands and some traditional metal bands. And it was cool. It was like Mastodon and Lamb of God put the whole thing together, and Testament was on there, and like Dying Wish was on there, and Gate Creeper was on there, and like all these bands that I kind of identify with for different reasons, right? And unfortunately, somebody chose to take their life on that boat. A person in the middle of the ocean dove off the 11th floor of the boat into the back of the boat into the water, and unfortunately was not found. And apparently, this is a pretty common practice, like more common than maybe people know about. And it's crazy. But like, I watched this thing happen where grown men, women, people, human beings, all these different kinds of people were, you know, sitting downstairs in this artist area, like in tears, when they were like, hey, we've been searching for this person for almost 9 hours and we can't do it anymore. We have to call the search off. National Guard's going to continue to look, and watched like human beings from all different walks of life and all different places, like kind of like break down. Like, and it was kind of crazy. Like, I was tearing up. It was like something I've never experienced before. Like the idea of like walking away from a human life and not staying there to help. And like it opened up like this air of like um helplessness because we couldn't do anything. There's nothing any of us could do. And it felt crazy, right? And like people hugging each other and like the whole ship for like a few hours. And then we played a show that day. And up until like midday, it was pretty somber. And then by the time it got to our set, it felt like a show again, you know, like us and Gate Creeper and a bunch of bands played in front of like a couple of thousand people. And it was great. And like, it was just really weird. And I feel like, you know, while I had these opinions and like I feel a certain way about things, it reminded me that, you know, a life is important, even if I don't know who it is. And had a couple of talks with a few people. You know, I feel like I made some new friendships, like Emma from Dying Wish is like really cool. And we talked about everything. And then the Gate Creeper guys are fucking great. And we talked about everything with those guys. And, you know, I met Ricky Rackman on that boat. And we talked about everything that happened. And it was like, didn't matter if you were like 60-year-old old metal dude or like a young hardcore kid, or if you were in like this death metal band, like everybody was feeling the same way. So what a really weird, like sombering, like interesting experience to go through. But it really made me realize like, man, maybe we should be reaching out to our friends more often. Maybe we should be doing that. So for a band like Speed to go out and put a video like that, even if it's a little, you know, corny or cheesy or whatever, however you want to wrap it up, like the sentiment is really important.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I get it. I understand it. But what a crazy experience that was to go through that with all those bands. Like, you know, occasionally it gets brought up amongst our band members, and like, when you talk about it, even the mood of this podcast got a little weird right now. Like talking, it's seriousness of it, you know?
Yeah.
So tell your friends you fucking love them. Like hug your friends, you know,
Straight up.
Don't be so tough that you can't tell your fucking friends that you love them. You know what I mean? And, but yeah, pretty crazy. So coffee. Yeah. I mean, coffee's cool.
I don't even know how we got there, but I think it's important.
Yeah.
You remember the first song you ever learned?
Smoke on the Water.
Hell yeah. It's classic.
Staple. You know, I didn't learn the chords. I learned the notes.
Just the
notes. Yeah. First song I ever learned was that song for sure. Yeah.
I feel like that's like 95% of people is that Smoke on the Water.
Yeah. Well, I mean, teaches you something really easy, that whether you can hold the pick or you're using the right amount of, you know, pressure to fret the notes or whatever, it still gives you the sound. The sound is there. And as long as you can get those 3 or 4 notes out, you're playing something and it's exciting. You know what I mean? You know, it's learning how to drive without learning how to drive. You know, as long as you're moving forward inch by inch, it's exciting. You know what I mean?
So kind of transitioning, Fit for an Autopsy is like, I know that you come from a hardcore punk rock background. I would like say Fit for an Autopsy is, or a lot of people would say that scene is very different. That deathcore extreme metal scene is different. I know that you're saying a lot of people in that play in those bands, and I know this as well, as those people they don't just listen to one genre of music. And most people I've met are super well-rounded, but coming from hardcore and punk, how did that shape how you play and how you, I guess, kind of view being in a band that's playing with like these really big metal packages and things like that?
All right. So first of all, until I joined Fit for an Autopsy, I sucked at guitar. And then for the first few years of Fit for an Autopsy, I also sucked at guitar. Okay. I'm going to be really super honest and like shoot from the hip on this. Coming from the hardcore world, I'm not saying there are not great guitar players in hardcore. There are fucking phenomenal, like Martin from Terra, great guitar player. There are just like, you know, dudes in hardcore that can play. Like Wayne from Hatebreed's a great guitar player. Rick Bryle from 100 Demons is better than most guitar players that I've ever seen. The dude is like a Paul Gilbert. If you took Paul Gilbert out of playing the music he plays and put him in a hardcore band, like that's Rick. Rick is and he'll call me a liar, but if you want to see good guitar player, he's great. The guitar players from All Out War, awesome. Unfortunately, Saab passed on, but Saab from Marauder, also
Mm-hmm.
awesome.
Insane.
Matt Henderson from Madball and all these other bands, also an awesome guitar player. Like, we can go on and on talking about all these great guitar players, but hardcore and punk rock in general is music about a feeling. It's about an energy. Like, you go to a hardcore show, you're not there to watch a dude rip a 10-minute solo. You're there to watch people jump on the stage, and like the lyrics are more important. So it's about a feeling and an environment and being a little unsafe and screaming about the things that are important to you. So that's what hardcore is. And then when you get into metal, it becomes that thing, but maybe on a lesser importance and more technical ability and the impressiveness of what you're playing.
Mm-hmm.
When I started Fit, I was like, oh, I can play guitar. And then I was like, can I? Can I actually? Because some of those riffs, like Will Putney is a monster. And like, he toured with us for the first record and then became like the main influence for writing and moved into growing his engineering producing career, which at this point, he is, one of the best between hardcore, punk rock, metal. Like, it doesn't matter. He's got a finger in everything. You know what I mean? Like, he's definitely doing it. So like, it's one of those things to me where I had to really sit down and look at myself in the mirror and be like, if this band's going to be successful, by the time we got to our third record, I was not doing the job well. And I had to start taking lessons, and I had to start focusing my guitar playing. And my right hand from playing hardcore was great, fast, triplets, like doing all that stuff, but my left hand was lacking. So I had to focus on doing that. And I took lessons from Dave Davidson from Revocation, Wes Hauk from Alluvial. I'm taking lessons right now from a gentleman named Sean Ash, who is like this crazy modern rock player that's like, it reminds me like if Guthrie Govan and like, Joe Satriani, a little bit of Steve Vai, like unbelievable player. Like, I've tried to like diversify the people that I'm taking lessons from because of the reason that you said there's so much different influence. I took lessons from Emil Wursler, who was in Doth and Chimera. Like, I've really tried to like work with different people. And I feel like now I'm becoming a better guitar player, like worthy of people asking me to show them things, and like, because I'm putting the work in right now,
Right.
And our newest record, because we've finally leaked on the internet that we're working on record 7 right now, is going to be something it's fucking heavy and it's really pissed off, but it's like fancy in a different way. Maybe a little less deathcore adjacent, a little more like of a straight metal record, but still holds the value of what we used to do. Like, our old fan base will like it. People that liked Hellbound will like it. People that liked See a Tragic Beast will like it. Like, there's just different moments. And then there's like this newer thing that we're doing.
Right.
So being that we're growing in that way, that's kind of the key for all of this. Like, it's like you said, like, people in our world are influenced by so many different things. And when you mentioned Suicide Silence earlier and how they're like your favorite deathcore band. Well, I mean, they're like the early iteration of deathcore, and like them and Job for a Cowboy and like Despised Icon and like all these different bands created a genre. And now it's grown into a thing where if you're heavy and you have blast beats, you're now a deathcore band, right? And that's just what it is. But the thing is we've grown into a different direction. And then you have a band like, let's say, Die Artist Murder and Fit For An Autopsy. We were produced and engineered by the same people. We work together. We tour together a lot. Those guys have gone more extreme towards the death metal, heavier, darker, and that thing. And we kind of like started getting influenced by the more melodic versions of that, but still with all the heaviness, the Mastodons, Eras, and the Meshuggahs, and that kind of world. So there is the split. And then you have like the Lorna Shores, who are like the big dogs right now, the super extreme, crazy theatrical, like operatic kind of like crazy keys and all this stuff
Yeah.
happening. And, so there's a lot of different versions of this happening. So you can't pigeonhole any of these bands anymore. And the genres had like a big boom,
Mhm.
and hardcore bands want to tour with these bands now. It used to be like, fuck no, like we would never do that. But we did a tour with Hatebreed, Obituary, Terror, Cro-Mags, and Fit for an Autopsy. Like, that's every kind of music in the extreme metal world, minus like grindcore,
Mhm.
that you could possibly put into. You got a street punk original hardcore band like Cro-Mags. You have Terror, which is a staple hardcore band. You have Obituary, which is like an early 90s, you know, first to second generation death metal band. And then you have Hatebreed, one of the biggest hardcore bands to do it. So it's
Mhm.
like the crossover tours are great. Everybody's doing their thing. And like, we live in a time where you can sound like Knock Loose, Pain of Truth, Terror, and still be considered a hardcore band. But all of those bands are more adjacent with extreme metal than they are with early hardcore.
Right.
So it's a very interesting world, you know?
Right.
Um, and I would like to think I'm pretty educated in all of those things because I like music and I grew up in all of these different scenes. But you said something, and I know I'm talking a lot, but you said something that kind of strikes me funny, how deathcore scene and the hardcore scene are different. Well, I'll tell you that the deathcore scene is a lot more like the hardcore scene was a bunch of years ago than the hardcore scene is like itself. Because the hardcore scene has grown into something different. Things I like about the hardcore scene: you can have an opinion and people have to accept it. You can be different. You can have a non um, conservative lifestyle choice. Don't fit the norm. You can be whatever you want to be and speak out about it and have a platform for it. And if people don't accept it, you can still have it. It doesn't fucking matter. You're allowed to be who you are. And that's sick, right? It
Mhm.
doesn't matter. But what the hardcore scene is kind of missing, that I wish it still had, was the passion for all of the music.
Mhm.
Because there was a point in time where every single band had a packed room. If there was a big band on the package, you had some new band from the middle of America that nobody ever heard of, you were going in and watching at least a few songs. Like, you were giving those bands a chance, and people were chasing music and they were passionate about finding new things. It wasn't always um, the band of the moment. It wasn't whatever band was the coolest or whatever, or the most extreme. People just wanted music, and you had to hunt for it and you had to get it. And I know that this is like a kind of old person opinion, but like, it was harder to get music back then. So you had to
Mhm.
work for it. Now people are a little spoiled, and um, it's a little easy to get music and it's a little easy to know what's popular. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I wish there was more of that, because deathcore community just wants to see bands. They
Yep.
just want to go to shows. They just want to buy your music. They just want to buy your merch. They want to talk to you and understand what's happening in the scene, where hardcore kids are grabbing at the thing of the moment. You know what I mean? And it's there's been like a shift,
Yep.
you know. But that's fine. Music moves that way. That's the way it goes.
Yeah. I definitely can see the it's like quote unquote cool guy mentality,
Mhm.
like the trendiness in
Yeah.
hardcore. Cause even
Yeah.
working for a promoter that I do some work for now, like I'll be working for like a deathcore show, packed, like crazy packed, and everybody's stoked and nobody's
Yep.
cooler than the next guy. Everybody's just there for it.
And it's a
But when I
community.
exactly. And for a long time cause I came from deathcore and like the metalcore scene when I was coming up as a teenager, uh I always looked at the hardcore scene as like, oh, like those guys are a community. I really want to be a part of that. And that's kind of what drew me, because I felt like the metalcore scene was a little more like uh standoffish, maybe. Like it wasn't as it was a lot more blended where I was from, but it was like hardcore was cool and like I wanted to be like those guys.
Sure.
But now, yeah, it's like I look at it like, man, I really wish that we could just chill and listen to bands. And
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, it makes sense. Like the evolution of it makes sense. Like if you think about it, the hardcore scene is very political, very open. A lot of the lyrics in the hardcore scene are different because they're about like social views and political views and how people are mistreated and more humanity based kind of things, where metal is about like traditional metal is about like dragons and wizards and like unrelatable things, like
right.
things that are fantasy based. And then you move into the metalcore world, and because some of those people are from the hardcore world, especially vocalists, right? Then and early metalcore is like bands like 100 Demons and All Out War, bands that have political and social and humanity based lyrics
Mhm.
built around a more metal sounding genre. Marauder,
Yep.
great example of I said this online once, and it created quite a split in my community. I said, I see a lot of people talking shit about deathcore, and then they go on to Discogs and pay, $250 for a Marauder rare vinyl and buy a Marauder long sleeve for 150 bucks. You're just buying early deathcore because Marauder sounded more like Obituary and Entombed than they sounded like Madball and Agnostic Front.
Mhm.
They were an early version of deathcore, and it's
Mhm.
fucking okay to like it because it's awesome. Master Killer is a perfect fucking record.
No
Who
skips.
cares? Well, no, not one skip. Actually, repeats, dude. Like that Crossfire track, what a hidden gem, dude. You know what I mean? So like you can talk about the separation between the genres, but it makes sense for you to start listening to deathcore or metalcore with those lyrics that were really about the same things that these hardcore dudes were singing about, except hardcore dudes were singing about beating people up and keeping them out of our scene. So it was saving what we believe in and standing up for the scene and the music. And if you were straight edge or vegan, like you had all these different platforms, right?
Yeah.
And then metalcore was about some of those things, but less about the genre of music and more about how it affects people on the day to day.
Mhm.
Like music about, like All Out War, like go read those lyrics. Like that dude's real smart. He's a fucking teacher. His lyrics are sick, right? And they're about those things. So it makes sense for you to go from metalcore to hardcore, but also the transition from hardcore to metalcore to deathcore makes a lot of sense because if you listen to some bands, sure, they're screaming about, horror movie lyrics and, Cannibal Corpse style lyrics, which are fucking awesome, but they're using that stuff for the extreme stuff. But then there are bands that, like you said, are hardcore adjacent and have a lot of political and social based lyrics that are smart and, lean into the good side of what hardcore is. So for me, sometimes I read these lyrics and I'm like, how do hardcore kids hate this so much? Are they just mad because it's heavier than most of their favorite hardcore bands and some of the breakdowns and the music is better? It's just more well played versions of what they like,
Yep.
you know? Well, I don't know. I like it all, dude. I mean, I don't like all deathcore. I don't listen to a ton of it, but there's certainly some good stuff out there, you
Yeah.
know. But I don't listen to all hardcore, but there's certainly some great stuff out there, you know.
Exactly.
And I'll support punk and hardcore for the rest of my life. We want to take bands like that out on tour. We want to do things with different bands that come in and out of those genres, like, like Great American Ghost is a really good example of this because they're a band that comes from that New England hardcore scene. Ethan has been in hardcore bands for a really long time. Their vocals and their music is very hardcore adjacent, but they're a little bit more of a metal band.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? There's some like there's some vibes in their music that are still hardcore adjacent, but it's definitely metal.
Yep.
But hardcore kids are like, oh, that sucks. And it's like, does it? It's just fucking really good, you know? So
It's
I don't
too
know.
produced. That's what.
It's my ass, dude. Yeah, that's like that's like the black metal argument, dude. Like, first of all, I do not fuck with black metal for a lot of reasons that I won't get into, but it sounds like they recorded that shit on like a my first Sony with a plastic microphone and you know, like poorly produced stuff. It gets to me. Like I like the polished shit. I like stuff that sounds good. You know, like what? All right, I'll ask you a question. What's your favorite New York hardcore record ever?
Holy shit, my favorite New York hardcore record?
Oh man, I have so many that I go back and forth about, but there's one that sticks out for me. I can
Well,
tell
I
you
mean,
what the best New York hardcore record is, but okay, your favorite sounding New York hardcore record, because I think my favorite New York hardcore record and like I think the record that sounds the best are different.
so Master Killer is probably my favorite, just because like the band
Reasonable.
to play in now, like the band I'm in now is so inspired by like that sound that
Yeah.
I've just listened to it so much.
Yeah.
But also Set It Off.
Yeah, that's the one. Madball set it off. In my opinion, it's produced. It sounds great. The guitar tones are great. The drums cut. The lyrics are great. The vocals sound awesome. I think the best hardcore record that's ever come out in New York City is Age of Quarrel. And it's like I bought that record in 86. Me and my brother got our hands on that record. Like I heard that record first few months it was out. Right. So game changer, well produced for the time. Hardcore bands didn't sound like that. People were putting money into that band.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's a lot of weird politics and people agree and don't agree with current state of certain people, but I don't give a shit about that. I'm talking about musically. It was a street thrash record. It was fucking heavy, no skips, sick record. Um, but Set It Off had the edge with the production, the songwriting. Matt Henderson's a fucking monster. Like, I was talking to Beto from like he was in Demise, he was in Madball, he was in all these bands, and him and I are always shooting shit about music. And we were talking about like New York records. Like, I'm a huge Leeway fan. I'm a huge Marauder fan. I'm a huge fan. I love Quicksand. I love,
Mm-hmm.
like we can go through the gamut. I like I mean, I think Train Yard Blues is like one of the greatest records to ever come out of Crown of Thorns record. Like, what
Mm-hmm.
a weird record and like lyrically weird, but he's acted like a lot of interesting stuff on it. And Mike DeJean is like a really great guitar player. And like,
Right.
again, my knowledge for hardcore supersedes of things that a lot of people realize how important that stuff is to my music career.
Right.
I mean, we can go through all the genres of that, and I'm sure we will like talk about different genres of that, but like records that sound bad got two plays from me. Two. I always listen to a record twice before I make a decision on it, unless it's really bad. But like, sure, if I'm listening to a demo, but Gorilla Biscuits Start Today, fucking fantastic record. And produced well, engineered well, sounds really, really good, and has great songs. Judge, all the Judge stuff sounds great. All the Bold stuff sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
Breakdown, a couple of their records aren't as good, but still pretty decently produced for the times. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
don't tell me that a record sounds good because it sounds like shit. Black Flag My War has better production on it than some of the bands that are releasing records right now. And what year did that fucking record come out? And that's my favorite Black Flag record. You know what I mean? So like, I don't even like the Misfits that much, and Static Age has better production on it than some records do. You know what I mean? And like, we could go back and forth about that comment all the time. Like, oh, if it sounds bad, it's good. It's like, get the fuck out of here. I want to hear that you put money into that record. I want to
Yeah.
hear that your guitar tones are good. You know?
So that's a conversation I have all the time with friends because I'm trying to get more into like my audio engineering stuff, and like I'm trying to record my friends and mix and make my friends sound good. And I've got friends that are like, oh, we're gonna, send it out for mastering, so like for free or like this or that. I'm like, don't, like, if you believe in what you've worked on, if you've put time and effort into practicing and recording it, and you're spending all of this quality time, why would you skip on paying somebody that specializes in mixing, specializes in mastering, because those are two very different things, a mixing engineer is not always a mastering engineer, and vice versa. And that's a comment for somebody listening right now. uh,
Yes.
learn the difference and learn the difference that it makes to your music. And why would you skimp out on that? Just so that you save a little bit of money and you can put it out quicker. I guarantee you, everybody in the band put $50 in. Like just spend a little bit of money and be
Here's
proud of what you did.
here's what I think. You can record a record in your bedroom with all the technology that we have today. There's this whole big thing on Spotify recently talking about this. But look at the biggest bands in our genres. They're going to studios and they're recording. They're paying for mixing. They're paying for mastering. They're paying for a producer to sit down and say, you know what, these songs are cool, but you can do this better, right? Too many people are smelling their own bullshit and pretending it's roses. Like, the reason that your band is not going to get bigger is because you're not putting it in. You're not putting the time in. You're not putting the effort in. You're not writing the songs and then taking them to somebody and them saying, this song's great. This song's great. This one still needs work to compete with these other great songs. You might write 5 bangers. Let's say you put out a 10-song record, right? You might write 5 absolute bangers and then have 3 that are good and 2 that are kind of like extra sauce. You know what I mean? Like, it's good, but it's not as good as the rest, right? So then you hire somebody, and I'm going to use Will as an example because, in my opinion, Will has worked with the biggest bands in metal and hardcore, right? And there's a reason why people pay that fucking dude to do these records, because they want the sound. They want the best version of what they are. So there's certain people in these worlds, your Will Putneys and your Kurt Ballou's and your Mark Lewis's and your Jason Sukoffs. There's these people in these worlds that are known for doing extreme music, deathcore, metalcore, extreme hardcore, punk rock. And the reason that they're paying for these things is because it's fucking important.
Yep.
Stop smelling your own shit and pretending it smells beautiful. Everybody's shit smells like shit. You might have 5 great versions of what you do, 3 good versions of what you do, and 2 pieces of fluff. You want to turn those 3 good ones into great ones and those 2 okay ones into good ones. So when you put your record out, people go, okay, this is a great record. There's, like we said, no skips, right? Yep. Doesn't always happen. Sometimes you write a stinker, and a great song on a record doesn't always translate to a great live song. We have songs that people ask us to play. We love this song. And then we play it live and it's a fucking stinker. And then you got to learn that about what your crowd and the people want. Who teaches you that? A fucking engineer, a producer, somebody that's going to say, guys, sonically, we can make a better tone for you. It sounds great live, but it doesn't work in the studio. And here's why. Guys, producer, this is not the best version of this song. This part drags. These part repeat too many times. Write something better. There's no banger in this. Sometimes you're just spending too much time and you can't see it with clear eyes. You need somebody that's standing up on the mountain, looking down, that can see from the distance and say, okay, these guys are too close to it. Let me help them. Or these people are too close to it. Let me help them. You know what I mean? And that's very important. And paying somebody to mix your record, are you fucking kidding me? You're buying the guitars, you're putting the money into your tone, you're writing the fucking songs, you're practicing them, you're learning them, you're spending the time recording them. The most important part is the mix. Even if the guitar tones aren't great and the drum tones are a little flat, somebody who knows how to mix can make it sound good. That's what you're paying for. Stop standing in the way of your own progress. Go listen. Like, Dying Wish recorded with Randy from Will's studio, right? Yeah. Have you heard those new songs that they released? Have you heard Emma's vocals? Like,
dude,
that shit is fucking incredible. You know what I mean? And yeah, stop lying to yourself and acting like having a producer engineer that's worth their shit is not important, because you listen to the couple records before and the things they released before, and then you listen to the things that now they are releasing, and it's a different world. It sounds huge, and those are the things you want to look for. Who's the biggest hardcore band that's ever existed? You tell me, and I'll
The
tell
biggest
you
hardcore band that's ever existed? I
ever.
probably probably Hatebreed.
Bullshit. Fantastic band, but not the biggest. Knocked Loose is the biggest hardcore band that's ever existed. They did 6,500 tickets in LA, one show. They did two shows in New York the other day that both sold over 3,000 and they were both sold out. I went to one of them. It was fucking insane. Knocked Loose is the biggest hardcore band that's ever existed. Tell me what Knocked Loose album sounds bad.
Honestly, I like all of them.
They're all great. They all sound awesome. Who do they
Yeah.
go to? The best. They go to the best of the best. They spend the money, they put it into production. It applies to their live show. They write the songs that they write. And I know some people would say that Knocked Loose is not a hardcore band, but they certainly are a modern hardcore band, right? Do you want to be the band that's drawing 4,000 people a night? Do you want to be the Hatebreed that's drawing, 3,000 people a night? Or do you want to be in a band that plays in front of 50 people? Put the money in. Same thing with deathcore bands. Put the money in. Every band, doesn't matter what you do, put the money in. You think Lamb of God is not putting the money into their production? Of course they are. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this is a weird argument and it's a weird discussion, but like Knocked Loose sounds incredible live. Their records sound incredible. They're doing production now. They have lights. Like I saw that show the other day. It's what's the lineup? It's like Loathe, Show Me the Body, and Knocked Loose. I forget there's another band on
And
it.
Speed.
Speed. That's right. It's Speed. And another great band. Their records sound awesome, right?
Yeah.
So like, don't you want to try to work towards being that? That's the goal, right? To have a career and tour and play. And if it's not the goal, that's awesome too.
Yeah,
Some
that's
bands
fine.
do shit. That's fucking great. They can do whatever they want to do, live their lives the way they want. But I want to have a career. And the way you have a career is put the time in, put the effort in. It's like coffee or anything else. You put the time and energy in, you learn all the processes, you figure out what works for your band or your coffee company or your fucking podcast or whatever, and you put it out into the world. Those are really the most important things, And I think it's a lie. I think bands that are okay with sounding bad because they don't want to put the money in and they think, oh, I don't understand why we don't get put on This Is Hardcore. We don't get the big tours or we don't get, well, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like the best of the best get those things, right? Those are the best of the best. The key components in our genre get those things. I don't know. I think it's an interesting thing. I've never heard a bad sounding Terror record. Have you?
No.
No. From their first record to now, they've always done great sounding records.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. We can talk about this forever because I think it shows in professionalism if you care about the way your band sounds.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like your name is on it. Like, why would you not take pride in what your name is on?
Yeah, and what were you gonna say?
No, sorry, you froze for a second.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. And not only is your name on it, but like you're making a lot of sacrifices. If you're a touring band, right? You're making a lot of sacrifices to go out and tour and do the things that come along with being in a band, right? Like you're sacrificing your time with your family, time with your friends, financial sacrifices that are very hard to deal with in the current economy. Like you're doing all these things. So do all of the best things to help your band grow, like, and like we live in a time where there's no more excuses. It can all be done and it can be done reasonably.
Right.
You can do it. It doesn't have to be the best, but make it good. And when somebody puts out a record that sounds good, saying, oh, it's too polished, and like pushing your glasses up and turning your nose to it, like to me, that's just you being mad because it sounds better than your record. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I don't know. Sonically, a record's got to achieve something nowadays to be taken seriously.
Yep.
but that all costs money. And, think about how it translates in merch sales. You know what I mean? Like it matters. That's
It
I mean,
does.
you tour a lot.
I mean, I wouldn't say a lot. Like we just got to the point where we're able to play the states. So the plan is into the end of the year, into next year, really push it hard.
Yeah. Well, you're going to find out what touring in America is all about really soon because you're going to be living in a van and
Yep.
doing the thing. And America is, or the United States. I keep saying America. What it's like to tour in the United States. You're in America for Christ's sakes. But, it's just like one of those things that's different here. Like Canada is one of those things, like the markets in Canada are kind of spread far apart, but there's not a lot of markets, right? You play fucking Regina once every couple of years. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like it's hard to get to those places. So, you do your regional stuff there, but when you come to the US to do touring, it's expensive and it's hard and the cities are far apart and your drives are 5, 6, 7, 8 hours and you're putting in the work. Why not put out a product that's going to make that more productive? You know
Right.
what I mean? And grab more of a crowd, spend the money, I mean, you can get a good mix for like 2 grand nowadays,
Yep.
you know, or you can somebody and pay 8 grand for an incredible mix. You know what I mean? So it just depends on your budget, but you don't bake a cake and spend all this time putting the love and care in it and not put icing on it. Like
Right.
you finish the goddamn cake. You know what I
Yep.
mean? So it's just interesting to me.
Well, everything that was just said, that was all free, by the way. So everyone listening, you're welcome because that's like I would say that's priceless advice. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, give yourself the best foot to stand on, and don't shoot yourself in the foot before you even get out there.
You asked how, like, that's another thing that I think where you can see where fit comes from because we grind.
Mm-hmm.
We don't, this is right now, the only touring that we've done this year was we went to Asia and
Mm-hmm.
played we played a festival in Manila. We played in Thailand. We're supposed to do China and Japan, but everything got a little weird. We only ended up being able to play the 2 dates, but that's all we've done all year, which is the most time I've had off from the band in 11 years. Like it's crazy to think about, but on average, we do like 150 to 200 shows a year.
Right.
And that's like a hardcore band schedule.
Yep.
That's like most bands in our world that do what we do don't tour as much as us. And like, a lot of bands will say, holy shit, how are you doing that? And, you talk to them and you're like, well, this is how we're growing. This is what works for us. We put out a lot of music and we do a lot of touring.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't work for everybody. But I think that's a very punk DIY thing where it's like, we're just going to tour as much as we can until the wheels fall off. And then we'll take a break, write a new record and come back.
Right.
But I mean, if you think about it, on the last record cycle, we released a full length. Just before our full length, I think we released a single during COVID, and then we did a full length right after COVID. I want to say 2022 that record dropped.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, What the Future Holds. And then we did another single. We did a split, and we did the Lamb of God cover, the At the Gates cover, all music that was released in one record cycle,
Mm-hmm.
and then about 150 dates a year on top of it. So like we don't know how to stop. And
Yeah.
that's work ethic because, when you were in a hardcore band, you had to fucking, burn the wheels, it's just what it was. You have to, people don't give you a shot. And
No.
I think hardcore bands are one of those things where, and this is like a real big plus being in a hardcore and a punk band, people want to see your band 5, 6 times in a year. In my world, it becomes difficult. Like you do 5 or 6 tours in the same, in the same world, and you just watch the numbers dwindle. So like our Acacia Strain Full of Hell Primitive Man tour was absolutely incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And It was probably the best headline tour we've done to date. The numbers were great. Merch was great. The coffee was awesome because there was a lot of good cities involved. So I got to do a lot of good coffee on that tour. Like everything about it was cool. Dylan from Full of Hell is like one of my favorite people I've ever toured with. We've been friends with the Acacia Strain forever. Primitive Man, their team was stoked to be there, and they were great people, and it was just a really great tour. And then we did a Lamb tour, an In Flames tour. Um, we did a European tour as a headliner. We did Asia, Australia with Make Them Suffer.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember everything. And then we did some shows with Kill Switch. We did a bunch of festivals, late summer festivals in Europe. Like it was nonstop. So this is the most time that we've had off. You know what I mean? So you have to spread out into different worlds and do different genres of metal and do different types of touring to stay as busy as we were, because our world, they only want to see you once or twice a year.
Yeah.
So then you got to do big band tour. And then you got to go to Asia, and you got to go South America, and we did a Canadian tour. That Canadian tour was cool. We brought that Squella Brian band out.
Yeah.
Like that tour was interesting. And it was just, it's one of those things for me where it's like, I want to work constantly. When I'm not working, I feel like I'm not doing the things I'm supposed to.
Right.
So, it's interesting. This topic, like being on a primarily hardcore podcast that is related to things that I really like, is kind of interesting. It's a weird dynamic. And to be, I guess, the first guest on your podcast that actually really comes from both of those worlds is also a kind of interesting dynamic, because there's a lot to talk about and a lot of similarities and a lot of differences and a lot of weird opinions that come with this. I'm curious to see what the community thinks about how much I know about the hardcore scene and how they look at my band after hearing what I have to say, because, Will Putney is in Better Lovers and End and Fit for an Autopsy. And we've all been into weird bands, and we all like different kinds of hardcore, from the Gorilla Biscuits and Bad Brains to, the Knocked Looses, and, you name it. Like there's not a lot of bands that I don't give a chance in hardcore. So we're very versed. I like Hope Conspiracy and Madball, and like all the crazy shit. Converge is great. Like I like a lot of different music, and I support bands for different reasons in different ways. And our band is always trying to take hardcore bands on tour. So if you're in a hardcore band that's doing well and you want to go and expand to a genre that would be really open and accepting to you, more than you would believe, hit us up. We've tried to, like, Dying Wish, I keep mentioning the name of that band, but we've tried to align our schedule so we could tour with that band. And we've tried to work these things. We want to do those sorts of things. Right. You know what I mean? It's just not, I would love to take fucking Jesus Piece on a tour. Talk about a band that fits in both of those worlds. And I always bust Aaron's balls and he gets annoyed with me, but I would love to tour with those kinds of bands. You know what I mean? And it's just making it work for the right time and place,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's why Terror, I feel like, has been so well known. I feel like they're one of the most famous hardcore bands amongst non-hardcore fans, because they play in front of everyone. Yep. And they don't give a shit.
I'll go on tour with fucking Fiona Apple or Taylor Swift. I don't give a shit.
I feel like they say yes to every fucking tour.
Everything. Let's fucking go. And you know what? If you have that attitude, it's going to be good for your band, because people will want to work with you more. Booking agencies will want to work with you more. It'll be one of those things where you'll get exposed. And if you're an aggressive music fan, a band like Terror could fully go on tour with, name any thrash band. Like, we just played a whole month with Exodus on a co-headliner where we closed every night with fucking Exodus. First of all, that's crazy talk. Like, Exodus, right? Secondly, it was Undeath, Darkest Hour, Exodus and Fit. What a cool mix of bands, right? And now we're taking Darkest Hour to Europe, and they're going to be on that European tour with Silosis and Harriet, another great band, right? And we want to do that kind of stuff. We
Yeah.
want to play those kinds of shows. I want to talk about a tour that we're going to announce soon, but I can't talk about
No.
it because I'm not allowed. But
Oh,
I'll tell you, it's going to be a fucking banger. What's your favorite new hardcore band? Since this is a hardcore podcast, what's your favorite like newer band that's happening right now?
I'd be curious to know yours as well. Have you heard Terena?
I have it.
Okay. I'm going to put you onto this band. Torena.
Okay, I wrote it
Okay.
down.
Yeah. So it's like, so I would say their first release was very kind of Sepultura influenced.
Cool. I like that.
With they don't have a frontman. It's one of the guitarists does vocals. So it's like
Okay.
that classic style of like I don't know even how to it's very like Cavalera-esque in my opinion, like how they kind of present themselves on stage. But
Okay.
their second release, what's it Eyes, what's it Evil Eyes with a Z with a Z. Um Crazy release. Like very Slipknot riffy, but like raw. It's mixed by Taylor from the Pit, Taylor Young. So it's got that really like raw drums, like dry drum sound. It's
Yeah, like
incredible.
you're in the room with the drummer. It feels like
Yeah, it feels like it's right in your fucking face.
yeah, that's what I like about that Eyes of the Lord record that he did. Like
Mhm.
that's got that the drums just sound like they're literally like on the table in front of you while you're listening to that record.
It's
That's
sick.
cool.
He's
Yeah.
so good at that. Like it's insane.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good stuff. Cool. Awesome. So I know we've kind of gotten off the coffee topic a little bit, but since we're talking about bands and companies that work with bands, I can kind of circle it back around.
Okay.
And I mentioned merch. If you are a band and you're interested in working with coffee companies, there are a couple of really interesting specialty companies out there that are doing stuff with bands right now. There's a dude that comes from the music scene, this guy named Matt, and he owns a company called Golden Lantern. And they're out of Southern California. And Matt has done like, I wanted to mention this because we did two coffee releases with him, one Ethiopia Costa Rican blend that was like knock your pants off good. And then we did a single origin Ethiopia anaerobic with him. That was like also incredible. And they were, stuff that we released for like record release stuff. But he's worked with a bunch of different bands. I know he did like Animals as Leaders and he
Mhm.
worked with Periphery. Pretty sure one of the Periphery dudes is involved in that company. Misha works with them. But they're a great company. If you're a coffee lover, they're a company that I keep in my house all the time, and they make great coffee. Their single origin stuff is out of this world. Their Ethiopias are incredible, but they also work with bands. So that's if you're in a band that's interested and you're listening, like they are a great company to talk to about them. That and also I know Will has recently worked with that band or that company Overwatch with Better
Mhm.
Lovers, did a couple of releases through them. So that's another great company if you're interested in working with and I like that these companies support heavy music. They're not afraid to step into our world, and like it's not some like black mask coffee company, blah, like scary, blah, corpse paint. And it's like real, like coffee companies that do like super high end coffee that's like they're willing to work with our world
Mhm.
and I love that and I would love to see more bands because I know there are a lot of people in our world that are into this sort of thing. They're into the coffee, they're into why the coffees are good, they're into different brands and like tiptoeing through those sorts of things. So those are a couple of companies if you're listening to look into if you want to support companies that are, again, this is my hardcore and punk rock roots, like supporting companies that support bands and support the world that we come from is something I feel like is very derivative of the hardcore scene. And, I think putting your money into these companies and helping them survive, because again, there's not a lot of money in these small companies. These are people that are doing this for the passion of it. These are companies that care about our music scene and care about good coffee. So look into those companies as well, because I definitely think those are a couple of good companies to support.
Hell yeah. That's Golden Lantern. I really wanted to have. I believe Matt and I were in talks quite a while ago, and it just kind of fell through as the pandemic was like leveling out and they were getting busy again.
Yeah.
But I really like the stuff that they do, especially with bands and collabing and stuff. It's very cool.
Yep. Them being willing to do a single origin with my band that was like pricey, like it meant a lot because that's like a big risk to roast and brand such an expensive, like high-end coffee and take that kind of risk. Like that means a lot. And we did really well with it. And the funny thing is they sent us a bunch of bags to sell on the road. And I may or may not have ended up buying like 10 bags of it because it was that good. It was really, really, really a great like single origin, like light roast, like super fruity anaerobic thing. It was awesome. That was a really good one.
That's sick. Well, we are rapidly approaching the 2 hour mark. This might go on record as my longest episode yet.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, which is great. It's all been very good. And editing wise, I don't have any clue if I'm gonna even be able to cut it down at all. But it's gonna be awesome. But before we go,
you release a two-parter, dude. You can do a two-parter.
During our conversation, I'm like, maybe we can just do a two-parter, like perfectly 1 hour each. So we may go that route. But yeah, I'll try to figure it out. Pat, thank you so much for hanging out. This really honestly has been such a like an invigorating conversation.
Oh, cool. I really love how there's your platform doesn't like, it's not stiff, it's not weird. Like you can have like a regular conversation. I just felt like I was talking about stuff I love so much. It was easy. So thank you for having me. And also thank you for being open-minded enough to have, somebody that comes from a little bit of a different world. Most people don't know my hardcore background, but it's a good feeling. You know what I mean? So I appreciate, the intermingling of communities. You know what I mean? It's really cool.
Before we go, I have one last question for you.
Sure.
What's your favorite city for beans and breakdowns?
Favorite city for beans and breakdowns. So do you want one city for coffee and shows, or do you want like my favorite city for coffee and my favorite city for shows?
You can break it like that.
Okay. So my favorite city for coffee is Jersey City, New Jersey. If you get an opportunity to go to Mod Cup, everybody that works there is great. I've met Travis. He's the owner. He's absolutely incredible person. I've become really good friends with Ricky, who's their one of their roasters. Like the whole entire team. Jeff is great. Chris is great. They're all great people. So go there, support them. For shows, this is hard. This is a really hard one. Denver, I would say it's a tie maybe between Denver and, believe it or not, Atlanta, which is kind of like my hometown area. At this point, I moved from New Jersey to Atlanta because Atlanta was a community we couldn't crack until recently. And we went from the small room at one of the venues to the biggest room at one of the venues. And the shows are absolutely incredible. So Atlanta, thank you for giving Fit a chance and giving us a home. And Denver, the fucking best. Also, Sweet Bloom is in Denver. So pretty close on the bean. Sweet Bloom
is dope.
That's one of my favorites, man. That's another one that's on the list that I wanted to make sure to get in there. So Denver, shows and coffee, great. Jersey City, New Jersey, fantastic coffee. And Atlanta, thank you for, all the love. And hope that answers your question.
Hell that's yeah. Pat, thanks so much. Hopefully next time you're in Montreal, we'll be able to catch up and drink too much coffee.
I fucking love it. Let's go.
Cheers. Thanks for listening to this episode of Beans and Breakdowns. I want to say a huge thanks to Pat for hanging out on the podcast. Like he said, Fit For An Autopsy has a tour coming up, so be sure to look out for dates near you. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review. You can find out more information about the podcast by following us on Instagram at Beans and Breakdowns or on the web at beansandbreakdowns.com. Until next week, be sure to stay caffeinated and wake the fuck up.